Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Grid Talk podcast. My name's David. I am the host, and as always, we got Wajid. There he is. I'll unmute him so you can actually hear him.
Hey, thank you very much. Thank you for having me as always, my friend. How are you?
Not too bad. We didn't have a bad Grand Prix, did we?
No, for Spain, that's pretty much Belgium 98. That
Don't push it. Don't push it. But we did have a very good Grand Prix. For those who haven't seen the result while you're watching a review show, for those who want to know the result, it's going to come up along the bottom of your screen now. I should have given you a little bit more warning there, just in case you wanted to turn off. But anyway, great Grand Prix weekend. I'm going to start with a little bit of controversy, shall we say, which happened before the race. The FIA and stewards, whoever it was, decided not to penalise but only reprimand Charles Leclerc for running into Lando Norris and Lance Stroll for running into Lewis Hamilton. I have to say that I think that it's a wrong decision because drivers are now started to use their cars as weapons on the circuit. We've seen it from Lance. We've seen the similar thing from Max in Imola. And we've seen it from a few other drivers just trying to swerve across, but it's then hitting the other driver, which is the problem. So, Wajid, what's your thoughts on all this?
If from next week we're consistent and the FIA doesn't start penalising next week, then it's not an issue. However, the precedent has always been from week to week to week to week to week. It's a different set of rules depending on who's on the panel, and that's where the issue lies. I don't know. I don't know if there's been some prerogative that let the drivers race a bit more unless it's incredibly dangerous and etc. I don't know where the line is because I feel like in a couple of weeks' time we're going to be having the same. We're going to be having a conversation where we have a like-for-like incident with Fernando Alonso and on Lando Norris, where it might have an effect on title challenges with someone not involved in the title challenge, and there's penalties being flown out left, right, and center. The issue is, as it has always been on this podcast, that said by yourself and me, that we just want consistency, and there's never any consistency race to race. I don't know what the difference is between this week and the penalty that will come up in a couple of weeks' time, where we'll be having the same conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say, I think it should be penalised. I mean, if we look over at IndyCar now, when you've got Santino Ferrucci and Romain Grosjean, yet again at Laguna Seca last night, deciding that in warm-up they're going to swipe each other's noses off and force past each other and block each other in practice. They've let that bubble for 2-3 months now. The same thing is going to happen in Formula One, and it's going, like you say, it's going to affect somebody's title challenge in the end. So I really do question whether we should be penalising this a little bit harder. I'll be honest, with the Charles Leclerc one, he kind of misjudged pulling across, but it was a weird line he was trying to take, which
it was a weird line.
But the Lance Stroll one is as clear as day. He got slightly balked by Lewis in a practice session. Deal with it. If you haven't got the mentality to deal with being blocked and putting in another lap, then you shouldn't be in Formula One.
And let's be honest, it's not like Lance Stroll was going to do anything this weekend, which he didn't. So what you do? I understand what you're saying, but the problem is next week is if this is now the precedent set, then fine. But I guarantee next week or the week after, if this was Lewis at Silverstone, if this is Lance Stroll on Lewis at Silverstone, it's a totally different outcome, in my opinion.
No, I do completely agree with that, and that's just something that I wanted to bring up straight away. Get the negative out of the way because it's not something we like to do. We don't want to be talking about the FIA and the stewards. We don't. We hate talking about them.
We actually do. That's the worst thing. We
But
actually do. It just doesn't seem like it.
They just keep coming up with something, and then when you've got a clear, I mean, let's put it this way. I know Max was trying to stir things after qualifying. We know that, but Lando had a broken front wing. Now, say that was the only front wing he had for us. Let's say it happened in qualifying. Then all of a sudden, that's a penalty. That is a penalty in qualifying. So why isn't it in practice? Personally, but anyway, we're going to move on because we're not going to sit and talk about the negatives. We're actually going to talk about the positives of the Spanish Grand Prix. Yes, not an overtaking fest, but the two-stop strategy seemed to work for majority of people. Sergio, you might want to try it next time. But speaking of Sergio, we're going to go onto Red Bull first. Now, they were not the quickest car in Spain. Qualifying, and that pretty much proved that, with Sergio helping Max out with a bit of a toe down straight, all planned. And Max not consistently being the quickest car on the circuit throughout the Grand Prix, to be honest. There's only about a small number of laps where Lando was stuck behind George, where that gap actually increased. So, Wajid, are we looking at a team that are now, I'm not going to say struggling, that's probably a bit harsh, but struggling to further their car as much as other people, and Max is getting the maximum out of it, and Sergio Perez is just basically putting in a performance that we've seen before?
I think we're seeing the Adrian Newey not being involved with the team in full effect now. You know, for all the talk Red Bull had of, I don't care. For all the talk Red Bull had of oh, you know, it's this person, it's that person. Ever since Adrian Newey has been involved less and less with the team, we're not seeing the same performance in that Red Bull. Now, jumping further ahead, Red Bull shouldn't have won this race at all this weekend, and I'm going to give, in a shocking turn of events, I'm going to give massive credit to Max Verstappen. He did what he had to do. He got off the start line. He jumped Lando Norris. He jumped George Russell when the tires were fresh in the 2 laps, and he built that lead. Lando couldn't overtake George. He had chances. He could not overtake him, and that's ultimately what finished the race, which is we saw the ruthlessness of Max Verstappen. Now, Karun Chandok giving a verbal BJ to Lando about how he's on Max's level. Like, get a grip, mate. You only did 12 races, so I understand any form of racing at the front must be like, you know, mind-boggling to you because you were always 5 seconds behind your teammate. But Max is still the class of the field. Right, people now saying, "Oh, look, he's winning in a lesser car." Like, he's not winning in an Aston. Let's calm down. It still came this year. It's still the car still came this year as the quickest car on the grid by a good portion. I just don't think McLaren expected that. McLaren nowhere near expected that Miami upgrade to work as well as it has done, to now essentially be week to week on par with the quickest car. And my only issue is that why did they delay the Miami upgrade? If they just stuck the upgrade on the car earlier, we might be having a genuine title fight, which is what people want. But I'll be honest, I think title wise, I think it's done, to be honest.
I'm going to disagree with you there. I actually think we're in for title fight because we're now seeing. Sorry, I was about to sneeze my head off. And you definitely hear that. You wouldn't need a microphone to hear me sneeze. Max Verstappen, he's kept his cool, but as we'll get onto a little bit later, he's a different person now, and I'll explain that a little bit later on. But I think Lando Norris is now generally believing in himself and can go and win that title. And Max Verstappen, yes, 69-point lead right now for Max Verstappen over Lando Norris. But we're seeing the races where McLaren can beat them, Ferrari can beat them. Say, at the start of the season, we're looking at it going, Max is going to have this won by Austria. And it's not happened, it's not happened at all. They haven't ran away with it. This weekend, yes, he was controlling the pace, but once he was about 10 seconds clear of Lando was just closing it in, even when he stayed on the soft tyres. So Lando's problem this weekend was not the car, was not even the start. It was that he kept coming in and coming back into traffic and having to overtake it. Took him 2 or 3 laps to get Russell, took him 2 or 3 laps to get Lewis, took him 2 or 3 laps to pass Charles at one point, I think, as well. So if you add all that up, he would have been right on Max Verstappen's tail. Whether Max was backing off at the end of the race, we really don't know. But he seemed to be struggling with that. So if he'd been pushed that little bit harder, who knows?
I also do want to say the old Max Verstappen of 2021 is starting to creep in. The one that's not as calm on the radio.
Yeah.
You're going, this isn't working, and things like that. So
it's almost every weekend now as well.
Yeah, and I think we did sort of question whether that old Max Verstappen mentality would start cropping up if the racing goes closer, and I think we're seeing Max maybe hasn't had the mental growth behind the wheel that we all thought.
Well, some thought. In terms of Red Bull, though, obviously, full credit to Max. He did exactly what he needed to do this weekend. And I've got to be honest, I thought he was driver of the day.
No, so
and that's for me.
No, absolutely.
Max, that's mad.
No, absolutely. Like, what else did the man need to do? He didn't finish. He didn't start on pole. He did his job, and he drove. How can you give someone driver of the day who bottled it off the line, was starting on pole position, and was clawing his way back into a race that statistically, especially at this race, if you're on pole, like I think it's like 7 out of 10 times you win.
Yeah.
So,
I think it was because F1.com/vote is banned in Holland. That could be why.
It might be.
But yeah, so I think Max, great job this weekend. Didn't let frustrations get the better of it. And I think at the start, he also knew that if he let George go, he could get George. But if he let Lando go, he was never going to get Lando. I think that was the situation Max had. So that's why he defended so hard against Lando and left that door open around the outside. Whether George Russell was dreaming of it or not, he also didn't dream of finishing down in 4th place after that start.
Sorry, just quick question. On the start, was it dirty? Was it dirty by Lando?
Yeah, we've seen that many a time. Lando left literally a car's width, which meant Max put it on the grass to make sure there's no contact. But I don't think in any part of my mind there was an issue with that start at all. If you're not going to race hard, which I think there's a lot of racing hard this weekend, which was good to see, even if it was DRS helped, which I don't like to see, but it is what it is.
Beggars can't be choosers, mate.
Exactly. But I think it was just hard by Lando. But if we move on, Sergio Perez. Now, the guy's been given a new contract. He's there. He's at Red Bull now for, I think it's 1+1, isn't it?
1+1, I think.
It's going to be very hard right now for a guy who's qualified 8th and he was 7/10 off pole, which Max was obviously only just under 200ths off. And then we go to a race, Max gets into the lead, dominates to a point, maybe not the quickest car, but dominates. And Sergio Perez is, finishing 8th on a free-stop strategy, which was never going to work in a million years unless you had the pace that Max had or Lando had.
And the safety car. Or
Yeah, probably a safety car.
And a red flag.
Yeah, and a bunny rabbit running across the track. I don't know. What has happened to that Sergio Perez again? Did it last season, but I don't feel it was to this extent. And right now, I don't think that Red Bull can say that Sergio is performing at a higher level. Because what we've got to remember is when Gasly and Albon were in the car, they weren't the quickest car. They weren't technically battling for wins. They were
on the fringes, I would say.
On the fringe of results, yeah. They could have won races, but they were, they had to beat Mercedes to do so, shall we say. Now they've got, for the past 3 years, the quickest car. Maybe not the quickest car on outright pace right now, but we'll see. But it's there or thereabouts because Max has won the last 2 races in a row. And Sergio has disappeared in qualifying and the race. What is going on in terms of, 1, his new contract, and 2, just as a driver? He's further off the pace than Albon and Gasly were. And this weekend, even more so, reminded me of that, with Max winning and Sergio down in 8th.
He sells merch in the Latino market. That's what it comes down to. Like no one wants to hear it. It was only the Latino community that was celebrating when Checo's contract got announced. Saying hold that, Danny Rick, you'll never blah blah blah. That's all it comes down to. The man sells merch in the Latin market because he's not justified being in that drive. You and I were both very, very surprised he got that contract at this point. We thought they'd be waiting later. And I think it's a case of that. And I also think it's a case of they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to rock the boat with Max. They think if they bring in a Yuki who is very, very explosive, even potentially Danny Rick to a certain extent, if he finds his feet with the braking of the car and gets used to the car and things like that, they don't want to. Why would you ruin that? Why would you ruin the harmony of knowing you have one driver who's total shit, pardon my French, and another driver that is more often than not going to be challenging for the world title when you give him a car capable of winning a world title.
Yeah, I very much agree with obviously the sponsorship side, the selling side of things with Sergio. He obviously does a very good job of that. I mentioned it in the preview. It is an RB contract, not it's a Red Bull contract, not Red Bull Racing contract, not RB Visa Cash App, travelers checks,
American Express, PayPal.
Exactly, it is a contract. So, are we now looking that because Helmut Marko over weekend, turned around and mentioned Hadjar, Iwasa, and Lawson about being in contention for the next RB seat. Now, rumours have come out overnight, which I'm not even sure Wajid is aware of, that there's a New Zealand-German link-up thinking of happening, which could be very much Liam Lawson and Aldi in talks. Nothing confirmed as yet, but if that's the case, then I think the only person, unless you're going to relegate Perez, you've got to look at putting Hadjar in the car because Iwasa's, he was putting the car in Japan because you couldn't put Lawson in it. Hands down, that's the reason. There's no other reason for that. So that's my view on it.
I also don't. Sorry, just I'm a category, but Hadjar's not good enough to be in that car at all.
Yeah, I don't think Iwasa is good enough. We have got a message from K1 on YouTube. Wilson has absolutely got to get his chance in the RB. I completely agree, but he has been told he can speak to other teams. So if he is going to think about Audi, I mean, it wouldn't be the worst. It gets you on the grid, doesn't it? And if Audi turn out to be brilliant and great, if they don't, you're talking the team who's bottom of the championship anyway.
No, but also, as you said, it's all about getting your foot in the door. Porsche, who won the title last year, nowhere near F1. Drogovic, who won the title 2 years ago, nowhere near F1. So, yeah, it's all great. Oh, we challenge an F2, we win an F2. But the last two winners of F2 are nowhere near on the grid. And, again, skipping ahead, we're talking about Kimi Antonelli, who, I'll be honest, I don't see the hype around. Who's going to jump straight into F1? Who cares about what car you end up in? You need to be sort of in the conversation and not the dance before you start talking about the top teams. So, give me what do you want, the F2 title, but being nowhere near an F1 seat, or being able to talk to whoever you like by any means necessary. And yeah, you might be on the slowest car on the grid, but would you rather be on the grid or not? That's what it comes down to.
Well, I would honestly throw this out there. I'm going to throw this at it. A few people have said, "Oh, your rumors have been a bit like you've been taking something through the last few weeks and running with it." But with Sergio Perez's results right now, the way McLaren are coming back, the way Ferrari are about, they're not straight up, but they are competitive to a point. Way Mercedes are also going to have extra wind tunnel time, but in the second half of the season because of where they are in the championship. But they dropped from second to fourth. If Red Bull come under pressure, which they've now got as you can see, a 69-point lead in the championship, and in the constructors they've got a 60-point lead. If they start coming under pressure, and it's 93 to McLaren. If they come to pressure and they need the extra points, and Perez is not performing, and somebody maybe in the Toro Rosso does, so Visa, Cash App, RB, does start performing, could we see a swap this season?
Then no. Because they don't want that backlash in Mexico.
There's plenty of races after Mexico.
They don't want that. Maybe I don't know. I don't see it happening. At least with Checo, you can get the occasional You can get the occasional performance. I just don't think they take the risk. If they're going to make the change, they make the change. They would have made the change, or there'd been talks about the change if he hadn't had a contract. Because he has the contract, they're not going to make the change.
Yeah, but is that because we're not seeing any performance from the two RB drivers? I mean, this weekend, while the car was not great, it's an understatement. They're battling Williams for the race. Danny Rick did manage to drag it to 15th ahead of Valtteri Bottas in the Sauber, who looked pretty impressive throughout the weekend until race day. Kevin Magnussen, who had the jump start. It might have been the Sauber pit stops that cost that. Albon, who obviously started for pit lane. Yuki Tsunoda, he pretty much dominated.
All weekend,
never mind the race. Yuki was completely off the ball. And obviously Logan Sargent, who came up last. But it's just a situation where we could see a change. I think we could. I don't know when. And like I say, about Mexico, it's a kind of a... But we've got to wait and see. Is Hadjar going to perform? Is one of the RBs going to stand up and be able to go into that Red Bull seat? Because you're not going to stick Hadjar in there. Because you're not going to stick a hungry youngster next to Max. They'll destroy him. He'll destroy him.
Yeah, and he will. Max is not there. Max is not the type of guy to be like, oh, welcome to the team, blah blah blah. Max will be like, get on with it, kid.
Yeah.
And you know what? You won the race. You won the race against the best. That's what you got. That's what you got to do. And also, like I said, I don't think Hadjar's good enough. I don't think anyone in that Red Bull Academy is good enough.
I'm trying to think who's in the Red Bull Academy. I'll get back to that later on. But speaking of regrets, McLaren, the quickest car this weekend, pretty much on pace, went for a differing strategy with Lando Norris. Oscar Piastri off the boil, I would say, considering how quick the car was. But Oscar Piastri came home in 7th, scored some points. Would have been good for him to get ahead of the 2 Ferraris, at least Sainz, who seemed to be just arguing with everybody all weekend. Lando Norris, so we're looking at a second win in a row that McLaren have. Unlucky in Canada, they've thrown 2 wins in the bin.
Canada, I would say they were unlucky. Yes, they should have run the safety car better, but Canada also, Spain they threw away. Okay, cool. Lando makes a mistake at the start, blah, blah, blah. There was no need to keep Lando Norris out for as long as they did on that first stint.
Yeah.
Especially when there was only a 3-lap deficit on the second stint. So why keep him out so long on that first stint of tires then? If you're not going to fully extend the next stint, I think the engineers and stuff like that realized, crap, we've made a mistake on this first stint. We've kept him out too long, and that's why then excuse me. That's why then they pulled him 3 laps in with that 3-lap deficit, because if they'd kept it any longer, he was going to end up behind both Mercedes again, and they didn't. And they didn't want that, so it was a very, very. I'm going to say, like, yeah, cool, you got Paul, but it was a very, very poor weekend by McLaren. And again, it's. I mentioned this. I mentioned this last week. I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago. It's losers' mentality. They're not used to being this high up the grid, even during the race. Do you remember the radio? Lando's engineers talking about, second, third place. Lando's like, I'm here to win. What are you doing?
Yeah, I think it's very much, you are right, because if you remember right, before, if Max flew up behind Lando, he would just
move out of the way.
He'd move out of the way almost, because that was a battle for second place in the constructors. Whereas now he's got. I mentioned this earlier in the podcast, and I'll come out with it now. I think with Lando, that win in. They always say your first win gives you some confidence. You know you can do it. And normally the second win just flows on and carries on. And I do think that Lando's confidence has gone from here. I mean, he was confident anyway, to up here. He is, you can hear on radio, we're going to try and win this. We can win this. Not let's try and beat so-and-so or whatever. Lando is fully focused now. He knows he can win this world championship. This is his chance. And it's clicked. And because we got such a long season, I mean, that was round... There we go. Count up the rounds so far. Round
9?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9... 10.
Oh, no.
That was round 10 of 24. There's 14 races to go with a 69-point lead. The position that Lando's in, say we go to Austria, a track he loves. He goes really well there. We've mentioned it before.
Yes, it's also a track Max is incredible at.
Yeah. So let's ignore Austria, because obviously that's a iffy one. Britain, I'll be honest, it's not gone great for Max over years at Britain. He may have won there, but it's not sort of dominance all the time. Hungary, again, one which trips Max up every now and again. And then Belgium, where we know both drivers go really well there. But quick, high-speed corners like the McLaren loves. So let's say by the next... We'll go 1-2 for the next 4 races. Lando wins 3 of them. but Max wins in Austria.
Austria.
We're going to ignore fastest lap points because I'm not going to get complicated into that. So that is an advantage of 2 races. So that's 14 points difference, if my maths are correct. So 14, 69, that's 55 points.
Yeah.
2 retirements and 2 wins for Lando, and he's back in.
How often does that Red Bull retire?
It's retired more times than McLaren this year.
Yeah. Okay. So that just means that McLaren. That just means we're waiting for a McLaren retirement, then, doesn't it?
But that is 4 races gone so there's still another 11. So then again, take them 4 races, repeat the sequence. So say we will go 1-2 till the end of the season, but same kind of sequence. You're still looking another. That's not going to win. That's still going to win Max the championship, but not by much. And that isn't going to happen. We know it's not. Lewis is coming. George can get involved. The 2 Ferraris can get involved. We've discounted Oscar Piastri right now in this conversation.
Yeah, no, that's true.
And also, I doubt. I want to just throw this one in before we let Wajid speak. If McLaren are serious about this, they will throw their full weight behind Lando Norris trying to win the Drivers' Championship than them trying to win the Constructors. The Drivers, I know the Constructors gets more point stuff than that, but imagine if you win the Drivers' Championship but finish 2nd or 3rd in the Constructors and you get more wind tunnel time next year.
It's also the prestige, isn't it? It's the prestige. No one cares about the prestige of the Constructors. It's the Drivers' World Champion. And just quickly before carry on, we got another comment by K1 saying something going under the radar this year is how good McLaren is on their tire deck. In terms of the pace versus the Red Bull, they seem to gain at the end distance, likely why they tried to extend for so long. I get that as something goes
That's
off.
okay.
I get that, but however, we don't know if Max is backing off at the end of the stint. And you know what? You carry on. Let me just mute this for a minute.
Yeah, it's okay. I think what the situation is with your message, I'll just pop it there as well, is that with the tyre life, the McLaren tyre life has been amazing. It has been absolutely amazing compared to Red Bulls. And it's definitely something that we're not going to ignore. It's something we've mentioned throughout the year, actually. But what I do keep saying is Lando at the start of stints is very careful on his tyres. Now, if he pushes 2 to 3 laps earlier on his tyres, he is winning that Spanish Grand Prix. If he pushes 2 or 3 laps earlier on his tyres, he's winning the Canadian Grand Prix. If he pushes 2 or 3 laps earlier on his tyres, he would have also won Imola. And we'd be looking at a completely different championship because Max would lose 7 points every time Lando gained 7 points.
It's a 42 point swing.
Yeah, exactly. So in terms of it all, I completely agree with K1 that they are very good on their tyres, but you have to take advantage of that. And something Red Bull used to do was try a different strategy for the sake of trying to beat Mercedes because they weren't used to winning. Sometimes just do the same strat because you are quicker. If Lando had caught Max, he would have passed him.
Yeah. I also do want to add quickly as well is, which wasn't mentioned, is Red Bull pit stops are normally slick. Max's first pit stop, as Max's second pit stop wasn't as quick, but also McLaren made a mistake on one of Lando's pit stops with the tire not going. The second one where the rear left didn't go on. Red Bull do not make those type of mistakes. And for them, a slow pit stop is like the one Max had, like a 2.5. You can't. It's these constant small silly mistakes that McLaren are making, if it's a driver or the team, and it's these fine margins that are ultimately costing them during this time. And there needs to be a mentality shift of, oh, we're not fighting for second. The entire team needs to believe that we're here to win. You know, it shouldn't be the driver saying to the engineer, well, I'm here to win. Why is the engineer giving an option of, oh, well, we can take third place? Like, what kind of pathetic? That is pathetic. I'm sorry. Yeah. Like, I'm sorry to be like, you know, ruthless, rude, whatever you want to call it. It's why? And if you're having that conversation, why are you having it over the radio for the world to hear?
Yeah, it is a difficult. I mean, I will admit, it's going to be a difficult transition for any team. That has been, you know, we've got to admit, McLaren were in the doldrums, you know, Alonso, Button, Honda era, whatever. They got a Mercedes engine, started moving up. This is the first time I could say clearly since probably 2005 that McLaren have the outright quickest car in Formula One. Whether it's on tyre wear, pace, whatever. You know, we look at 2007, 2008, they're in close battles with Ferrari. One weekend they'd be quicker, one week and they wouldn't. 2005, that Kimi Räikkönen McLaren would be the quickest. It'd break down, but it'd be the quickest.
It should have won that 2005 car should have won the world title. Let's not.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, this is the first time in 20 years, pretty much, that McLaren have gone, we're turning up to the circuit and our car is the quickest on an outright lap. But you've got to remember, they haven't gotten Max Verstappen or Lewis Hamilton or Fernando Alonso in the car or Vettel or, you know, Lando is not that caliber just yet. I don't care what anybody says. And Oscar is kind of playing the Sergio Perez role at the moment, needs to really book his ideas up considering the car he's got. Speaking of cars he's got, back on the podium. He's back. He's back on it. Lewis Hamilton takes his first podium since the Mexican Grand Prix last season. Race podium. We'll make that clear. Just before Mercedes fans suddenly jump on me and say he's been on the podium in a sprint. Great to see Lewis back on form. George dare I say it, playing the team game. Wow. I'm going to put this out there straight away, though. Obviously, at the start of this weekend, there's comments about, there's going to be, you know, there's an email going out. Toto says the police are involved because it's like a conspiracy thing about them affecting George's car. Lewis's car to make him slower so that George beats him, etc., because he's leaving. Then, throughout the weekend, Lewis and George are very close, don't get me wrong. And then we get to qualifying. Lewis mentions his tyres, but he's still quickest in Q1. He's still quicker into Q2, only just by a gnat's whisker. I don't know why that's even a saying. But yeah, by one of Wajid's beard hairs, shall we go by? He takes third place over George.
As his third. And
yeah,
because he's so emotional.
Social media, suddenly the Mercedes social media has suddenly changed tact. A lot of Lewis Hamilton on the social media. And we had that little video of Mick Schumacher doing a tour of the paddock. Don't know if you saw this, Wajid.
I didn't know.
Mick Schumacher was doing a tour of the paddock. He got to Toto's office and sort of went, oh, look, there's one of the engineers in there and whatever. Poked his head round the corner and said, kind of walked off sheepishly and said that it was Bono and Lewis in there with Toto. Now, I'm not one for massive conspiracy theories, but these 2 tenths of a second in qualifying suddenly disappearing, Lewis being on the pace, and let's be honest, the only reason he didn't pull away from George at the end was he was protecting the tyres because he knew he couldn't catch Max and knew he couldn't catch Lando. You know, he knew third place was the best he could do, so he'd sit there. And also he was available if he needed to tow along George in any kind of way, who had, for some reason, gone for the hard tyres.
Sorry, was that his decision? Was that a team decision? I'm still trying to work that one out.
That's a difficult one. We'll get to that one in a minute, because actually that's a very fair point, because we don't know. I don't think I actually know which way. But all of this controversy and all of this happiness has suddenly turned up after an alleged email from inside the Mercedes team was thrown. Now, let me put this way. Is there any chance in the world that Mercedes have alleged this email so they can change? There's one way of looking at it. They've alleged it. It's not happened, but they've alleged it. And it's just allowed them to change tack without looking like they're, tapping themselves on the back of the hand. Or it's happened. They didn't realise how much the feeling is strong out there for this not to happen. They've suddenly realised, oh, actually, we are this, almost blinded by the idea that Lewis is going. They've concentrated so much on George that that's not compromised Lewis in a purposeful way, but it has compromised him. And they've gone, we need to concentrate a bit more on Lewis, concentrated on Lewis, and all of a sudden, bang, podium.
I think Mercedes F1 team realized there's a difference between brand loyalty and loyalty of the brand. In the sense of Mercedes aren't Ferrari. Ferrari have a gaggle of fans because of the Prancing horse.
I've never heard anybody call the Tifosi a gaggle. That's a new one.
There you go. You get something every week here. As in, there's total brand loyalty to the badge. They've had incredible drivers. Prost, Seb, Michael, obviously, Fernando, but it's always been about the Tifosi. It's always been about the badge. Mercedes think because of their success that they have this large fan base because of the Mercedes brand, and I think this year more than anything they've realized it's not because of the brand, it's because of the driver who represents the brand. And they've had strong hate on social media before about give Lewis the car, etc., etc., etc. But when Lewis came out in Canada, was it Canada where he said his tire pressures were rough?
It was kind of end of Monaco, I think it was.
Yeah, but when Lewis has come out and said there's something wrong with my tire pressures, and then he's slower in Canada at a racetrack, he's amazing. Then George made the mistake in Canada, which then over the radio, oh, you guys are racing, by the way, when 9 times out of 10 you normally hold position if the driver makes the mistake. I think this week there's been a realization by Mercedes that we may have made a mistake here. And I'm with you. I think it's really interesting that all this speculation and the stories all come out, and all of a sudden the driver that you and I, regardless of sort of comments and thing and fanboys and that we might get accused of on this channel, but the driver that you and I have consistently said is probably on his day still the second quickest driver on the grid, tire wear or not, he beats his teammate.
Yeah. I mean, I have got to say that at the start of the weekend, Lewis did come out in the press and say, can we calm things down? So I do wonder if, going back into the week, Toto and Lewis have sat down and said, look, maybe my idea of Lewis going to Ferrari early or leaving Mercedes early, maybe something like that has come to fruition, where Lewis has sat down with Toto and said, look, we need to sort this out. Or Toto sat down with Lewis and said, look, we need to sort this out. We don't want all this hanging over us for the rest of the season. And Lewis has probably, I don't know, I'm going off the idea that something's happening in there. Lewis has sat down and said, look, I am here. I will be committed to you, but you need to be committed to me. They've sat down. They've cleared the air. They've said, you've got fair game between the two of you. And then Lewis is all of a sudden settled, happy, whatever. Let's see when we go to Austria, where Mercedes aren't always great. They're not always had the best of forms, except for when they're dominant. Let's go to British Grand Prix, where we know Lewis is just, his record speaks for itself. He's
incredible at Silverstone.
Yeah.
Let's call it.
Let's go there. Let's see how the next few races go. And if the next few races go how I expect them to go after this, my idea of Lewis going off to Ferrari early will be dead in the water. Because I don't think he wants to leave Mercedes early. I just think if he was being put into a corner where I'm not getting equal treatment or anything like that, then Lewis will say, I'm going. And that's why I'm saying I don't think it'll be quite happening just yet. But that's one side of it. The other side is George Russell. Now, we know George, we've been very critical of George's driving at times this season and last season and the way he goes about his racing. This weekend, I think there's a couple of laps where I was doubting whether he was going to be sensible in terms of a team position. I wouldn't be surprised if he was saying at one point, I will let Lewis through, but if Lewis doesn't catch Lando, can I have my podium back? Which we didn't get over radio, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was there. But he was very sensible in how he let Lewis past.
Sorry. I do also want to say that during the second stint, he came onto the radio and said, I am protecting my tyres. Let's work together as a team. But basically hinting that, I don't want him to pass me. So for as much as you're praising him, there was that particular radio message where he essentially went, don't let this guy pass me. Even his press conference afterwards, he wasn't somber. It wasn't the typical, Lewis beat me. Lewis has got the better of me. I don't know. I need to go back to the drawing board. He seemed fairly accepting of the fourth place. To be honest, I think the way Charles was hounding him down in the last sort of 3 or 4 laps, I think he's happy. He was glad to get fourth more than anything else. Let's see what happens in Austria. As you said, the Mercedes generally isn't quick. However, I think this is the first year their car under these regulations is much better in medium to high speed corners rather than low speed circuits. So, let's see what happens. I know you're the one that said that they may terminate the contract early, but I think, like I said, given the fallout, especially with the letter Toto in the corner, I do think any chance of them letting Lewis out of his contract early now is totally dead in the water.
I don't think it's dead yet. I think we've got to wait and see. Let's see if he continues to be treated as he probably should be. Whether he was before or not, that's just all rumours. But treated, kept happy, like he should be, and get him to the end of his deal. And then the rate this car's going, may see Lewis Hamilton win his final race for Mercedes. Who knows? But it's not looking good where he's heading off to. right now. They seem to lack a bit of spark, and it's going to be interesting to see what. Thank you. So just get delivery of a drink so I can actually speak. Okay. Ferrari have lacked spark recently since Monaco win. Canada was an absolute downfall. This weekend, back to kind of where they should be. They were competitive in qualifying, but then in race just seemed to fall away.
It's an interesting one because I also think where you qualify in Spain matters a lot. People don't mention it, but it's up there with Monaco, where I think historically, I think there's only ever been one time that someone's won, or like two times someone's won the race where they didn't start in the first two rows or something stupid like that. Yeah. So they were already at a disadvantage being on the third row. Both of them made quite good starts as well, because they both overtook Lewis, but they were too busy squabbling with each other in that first corner that Lewis has overtaken them.
Yeah.
And then I think the wrong car. I think the wrong car was the lead driver for that first stint, because you can tell Carlos is not there to play the team game anymore. He doesn't care. Charles was quicker. Ferrari did go with the alternative strategy with Charles, and I lambasted McLaren for saying kept Lando out too long. They definitely kept out Charles too long, because on that second and third stint he had the pace, but when you're 9.5 seconds back from your teammate and you have to claw back 9.5 seconds and then do the overtakes, it's not the easiest race in the world. I think they'll be back next week, but I think this is where, if you had a Max Verstappen or Lewis Hamilton in the car, you don't get the standard drop from Monaco to Canada to Spain.
Yeah.
I think there's that relentless ruthlessness, which is, even if they had that off week in Canada, it's like, okay, we were shite this week, we're back on it next week. And I think that's where it comes down to. I just think, again, it's a mentality thing. The same way McLaren, it's the same in Ferrari. They've not been in a title challenging car. They came with they've got a very, very good car this year, but I just think it's an internal mentality thing.
I do think it's an issue with Ferrari as well, because obviously we've spoke about Carlos running out of options even for next year, so he's trying to prove himself. I think that was pretty clear on the radio message with the Lewis Hamilton pass. He actually turned around and said afterwards that he said it just because it might play to his advantage. And in terms of himself as a pure winner, Wajid will be back in a minute. He's just got to go get his charger. In terms of a pure winner, it really wasn't. Excuse me. It really wasn't a situation that was going to be easy for Carlos Sainz to take. So, in terms of the positioning of the cars, that was fine with Carlos and Lewis. But yeah, Ferrari really need to try and pick up some of that form they had from Monaco. Obviously, I think they'll go well in Hungary, because that's another slow speed track. But they really need to be picking up stuff quicker than that. It's going to be. As for Charles Leclerc, I think he's just looking forward to having Lewis alongside him. It's not going to take long for those two to gel. They've been gelling quite often on the tours around the circuit, on the back of a bus, shall we say, the driver parade. But that seems to be the general spark. There we go. We got him back.
Sorry about that. I just need to get my charger.
Rather you don't run out of battery. But yeah. Something that came up over weekend, because we're going to move on to Speedy Alpine.
Sorry, I just want to just getting back to the Ferrari. I just want to say one thing about Carlos, because I did catch the end of that. He's become very whiny. I think the pressure of losing a seat, the sort of big boys, not Mercedes,
Not
even Red Bull, not wanting him, not linked to that seat. Because there's nothing wrong with that overtake by Lewis. If anything, Carlos hasn't given him the space in turn one in the first place, which has led to Lewis having to push into turn two, because if you see the overtake, Lewis is essentially on the curb. There was less than a car width on that inside, and then he's there. This is a disgrace. How can they not penalize him? Blah blah blah. He's become really, really whiny, and I also think it's affecting his driving, because I think the pressure is getting to him that, he might not be. There's a potential he might not be in the car next year at this current rate. Will he be? Probably, but he's definitely not going to be in a car where he's challenging the way he is. And I think it's starting to affect him on the track. I just wanted to put that out there quickly before we move on to the
that's absolutely fine, because it does segregate into Alpine. Now, we've seen them go on a bit of recovery. Double points for the second time in a row. So, great. 9th and 10th again. Not what we're after, but it's huge improvement to what it was earlier in the season. And Flavio is officially back. Flavio Briatore back in the paddock. Now, we spoke about that on the previous show, so if you want to go see that, you can. Less so the opinions on Flavio, but he was seen swapping numbers and in deep discussions with Carlos Sainz Sr. Is this now a door opening for Carlos Sainz Jr.? Not that he likes to be called Junior, but Carlos Sainz Jr. to join the French team again, because between Alpine, Williams, and Sauber, is it probably his best choice, unless Adrian Newey?
Probably. He's also got the old links there, hasn't he? Because that's the team he quote unquote defected to from the Red Bull house. So he's got the links. He knows how the Enstone team works.
It's also a team that could potentially challenge for championships, because it has done before.
Yeah, I could also. Did a
pig just fly out your window?
I could also be dating Camille Cabello next week as well. So anything's possible. Anything's possible, I guess. So yeah, I think that's his best chance. I think when drivers moved, obviously they're looking the shortest term possible, which is the quickest car I can sit into. If you have the choice between a Sauber, a Williams, and an Alpine, you go into the Alpine. So yeah, probably. But the less said about that particular thing, because I don't want to be accused of spinning the wheel mill for absolutely no reason whatsoever.
I mean, we've got at the sites talking to Alpine. We know somebody like you, he's not going to Alpine, but if Renault really do back Alpine, they have the money to put behind them. In terms of Audi, we just don't know what they're going to do. They've been very successful in other forms, but we just don't know. And in Williams, you really want to be looking at the idea that Max Verstappen, not Max Verstappen joins Williams, Adrian Newey joins Williams and designs them an absolute rocket. Who knows? It's going to be tough to know. I can't decide on that one. But Alpine are back on the rise and now back up into 7th in the World Championship. They're past Haas, and now their target will be to get the extra 20 points to close on RB. That could be quite an interesting battle by the end of the season, if I'm honest. But the bit you've all been waiting for. If you've been watching our preview, you will have seen our predictions, and we will go to them now. Wajid, how do you feel you've done?
I did terrible. Thanks, Lando.
Okay. Well, that cleared that one up. That is your qualifying. Yeah, I got it right this time. So this is our qualifying for the Spanish Grand Prix predictions. We both went Verstappen pole. Didn't happen. Norris second. I put Sainz second. I obviously lived in a dream world. I actually had a comment thrown at me from somebody I know saying, you're a bit adventurous saying sites to win home Grand Prix. Well, I wasn't going to put Alonso, was I? So in terms of the full qualifying results, because I've actually kind of forgotten them, so I'm just going to bring them up on screen. There we go. So Lando Norris pole, Verstappen second, Lewis was third from Russell and Leclerc. So I did say, though, I thought Perez might go out in Q1. Fair play, Sergio, you got 8th.
I had Fernando potentially doing better in his own Grand Prix, and he nearly struggled to get out of Q1. So
and you also predicted a safety car or red flag, and that absolutely we didn't even get a yellow.
Yeah, sorry about that.
To be fair, we should have got a yellow, but they didn't put one out for Albon.
Yeah.
Race. I'm just going to lean back and sip my cup of tea. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Lando.
I mean, to be fair, last time out, I had Hamilton on the podium and I decided not to do it. If I had, I wouldn't have been far off. I'd just missed George Russell out.
That's a very good week for you, that.
Yeah, I mean, if you slip George Russell into 4th, it is so close. But yourself, Norris, Leclerc, no, Verstappen on podium. I suppose that's a start. Sites, yeah, Russell 5th. No, he was 4th. Yeah, so
great. That's a great showing by me this week.
It's a great job we're not scoring this properly anymore.
Oh yeah, because I would it'd be a clattering at this moment in time.
Do you notice something? This season, now we're not scoring it properly.
You're killing it.
Yeah. Well, I won't say killing it. I'm only getting a couple of points, but it's more than we used to get.
It's more than I'm getting, so.
Yeah, so that is pretty much it for the Spanish Grand Prix review. I'll get it right. We will be coming back very shortly. Not right like this second, but we will be coming back this week. But I don't know why the constructors' points are still rolling around. At least have a race result. We will be having the preview to the Austrian Grand Prix coming up later in the week, probably Thursday. And we'll be able to do a review then. We did think of doing it now, but think something's going to change. And then we look complete idiots when it's thrown out on Thursday. So, Wajid, thank you for joining us. If you want to Instagram Wajid, it is there on the screen. If you want to send me any social media stuff, as long as it's positive, you send it to a bit below. If not, send it to Wajid. He'll filter it out for me.
Stop how it works.
Yeah, that's the best way to do it. But yeah, Max Verstappen back on top, but we actually possibly have a championship challenge. We'll find out over next. I know you keep saying we don't, but we've got 2 races in 2 weeks now. The momentum is there for McLaren to try and close that gap.
Yeah, we're only going to Max Verstappen's favourite track.
It's not Zandvoort yet. Right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. If you are over on YouTube, thank you for joining us, and especially K1 for his comments during the show. If you want to drop your comments in, please do so under the video. If you are on Twitch, I'll see you later because I'll be back on for the Formula Ford soft commentary and a bit of iRacing stuff later on. But first of all, it's dinner time. Always like food. We'll see you later on.
Peace.
Bye.